The second aorist and the first aorist are not two different tenses, but they are forms, two different forms of an aorist tense. You have the second aorist form, you have the first aorist form. There isn't any difference by way of their translation, but there is a difference by way of their formation. So now let's look at it. Paragraph number 295 on page 120, he gives you the first aorist indicative active of luo. Now let's just look at it. Elosa, elosas, elose. Elosamen, elosati, elosan, lusai. All right. What is one of the telling characteristic that you have an aorist?
Augment?
The augment. Yeah, the augment, the horn, in other words, eh? The augment. The augment epsilon before the root stem. Now then, in this entire conjugation, there is one particular letter that is the same outside of the augment and the stem. What is it?
Sigma.
Sigma. All right, now what other tense have we studied that has the sigma?
Future.
The future, that's right. Now then, you will want to be careful not to confuse the first aorist and the future by virtue of the sigma. Now the only difficulty, or one of the telling things, is that the future doesn't have an augment, does it? No, it doesn't have the augment before the stem. The future does have the sigma, but now notice the type of endings. The future has the primary endings, whereas the aorist has the secondary endings, but the secondary endings are sa, sa, se, sam, and sati, sam. Sai. Okay? All right. He gives you the explanation that the first aorist stem is formed by adding sigma to the verb stem. Secondary active personal endings are used. Noon is not used, however, in the first singular. In the indicative, there's an augment as in the second aorist, but please observe this. The infinitive, of course, does not have an augment. Now, you've learned that, haven't you? When it comes to the matter of the second aorist, too. All aorists, when it comes to the matter of the infinitive, do not have augments. Okay. Now then, he gives you the first aorist middle of luo. The same thing applies concerning the middle. You have the augment, you have the sigma, and then you have the secondary endings, but the secondary endings are primarily with the alpha. Elusamen, eluso, elusato, elusamatha, elusaste, elusanta. Then, without the augment, lusastai. Okay? Now that is just further explanation that he gives you, which not difficult to read at all. Now then, what he does do, he's going to double up on you now, and that is, he's going to take you to the formation of the first aorist verb that sometimes do not end with an alpha, epsilon, or omicron. Those verbs that do end in alpha, epsilon, omicron, and those stems that end in a mute. So what's he doing? Okay, now he's giving you just about 5 things here. First of all, he gives you the first aorist indicative active. Secondly, he gives you the first aorist indicative middle. And then next, he gives you the first aorist with verbs that do not end in alpha, epsilon, omicron. Next, he gives you verbs that do end in alpha, epsilon, and omicron. And then he gives you verbs that end in mutes. Okay? Those 5 things. So there are 5 things to just sort out in your mind. And I would pay quite close attention to it. Now we're going to give a little bit of explanation here as we read along. Now then, paragraph 301. He's going to deal with those verbs that do not end in alpha, epsilon, or omicron, or end in mute. For instance, koluo, I hinder. Now the first aorist of I hinder is ekolusa. You have the augment before the kappa, you have the sigma following the upsilon, and then you have the alpha following the sigma. First person singular. Same way with pistuo, I believe. Epistusa. See that? Augment, verb, suffix, sigma, alpha. Any question there? You see that? All right. Paragraph 302. Generally, verbs that have a first aorist do not have a second aorist, and verbs that have a second aorist do not have a first aorist. He said generally. A few verbs have both aorists. When they occur, now it might be well to remember this. When they do occur, the first aorist is usually transitive, and the second aorist intransitive. All right. What do we mean by transitive and intransitive? What does transitive mean?
To go from one place to another.
Takes an object.
Yeah, that's a transitor, right? Well, when it comes to grammar, the transitive is a verb that takes an object. That takes an object. The intransitive is a verb that doesn't take an object. Are we relatively happy? Right? Now he says, it's a few of them. Now, in the New Testament, it is common for an aorist, second aorist stem to have an alpha of the first aorist. Thus, ada, ados, adamen, and then apa. You remember that? We've already had those 2 words, haven't we? You've had adon and you have apon. Well, you've also got ada and you've got apa. So, there are a few of the second aorists that have the alpha. Now then, he says, let's get back in track and get our minds going with reference to these verbs that are going to end in alpha, epsilon, omicron. Now he says we're going to make these into first aorists. And when it comes to the first aorist, they are going to act like the future. For he says, look at agapao, I love. The first aorist is agapesa. All right, why does the alpha of agapao change to eta?
The augment contracts with the alpha.
All right, that's just a little scheme. You see, the alpha is lengthened to eta, the epsilon lengthened to eta, the omicron is lengthened to omega. See that? All right.
At the beginning and at the end?
Well, because, look, let's put it on the board here. Agapao. I love. Now I want to make that a first aorist. And so I'm going to put down agapa. And I can't use that, so I'm going to put sa there. Agapasa. And I'm going to put an epsilon over there by virtue of the augment, eh? Okay. Now then, as was true for the future, that contracts to eta, and these two contract to eta, so I've got agape so. I'm sorry, agape sa. All right? Does that help us a bit? See the changes? Every aorist is augmented except the infinitive. And so when you put an augment on that, they don't get along.
Right.
They don't get along at all. So they fight and things change. It becomes a, ga, hey, sa. All right. Now then, he said, look at poieo. Well, poieo doesn't begin with a vowel, does it? So you've got your epsilon, augment, epoi, but it ends, it's one of the eo contract verbs, so it becomes epoiesa. Then you got plerao. Again, no vowel that precedes or begins the word. So you just have the epsilon by way of the augment, but the omicron changes to the omega before the sigma. Same rule, you've already learned it. You've learned it with the future. The only thing that you haven't learned is the augment. So if you've learned your future, you've already got your first aorist. Isn't that simple? Just as simple as falling off a dead log. All right. However, he says there are some exceptions in Greek, which you'll always learn about. It isn't the regular things that bother me, it's the exceptions that bother me, isn't that right? And I find that there are almost as many exceptions as there are regular ones, and sometimes I think there's probably more. But nevertheless, I get used to them. But a few verbs like kaleo, I call, and teleo, I end, I complete, do not lengthen epsilon before the aorist suffix. Thus, the first aorist is ekalesa. See that? The epsilon stayed. It put up such a fight with the sigma that it didn't fizz it a bit. Now then, teleo, I finish. Etelesa. They didn't change either. So you found two exceptions, and just get very, very suspicious when you come across a word like that, because it just doesn't change. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering about, just before number 2, he's got the active infinitive of agapesai. The a, aga, didn't change. Only
That's right,
infinitive?
because infinitives don't take augments. Infinitives do not take augments. That's the alpha, see? Not the A, but the alpha.
Right.
All right.
Right.
All right. Now then, number 3. Verb stems with endings in mutes make the same changes with sigma of the sigma alpha to form the aorist as was made with the sigma of the future. Now you see paragraphs 215, 216, and 217 right out beside that review. 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 Review in connection with these particular words here. And now we're going to look at the labial mutes, the palatal mutes, and the lingual mutes. The labial mutes are PBF. So he gives us 2 examples. Pempo. The aorist of pempo is epempsa. That's the first aorist. Grapho. The first aorist is egropsa. See? Your P and your phi change to psi. All right, now then, your kappa gamma key. Dioko changes to edioxa. Dialego changes to dialexa. Now then, what happened here? What happened here? Someone tell me what he threw at us there. He threw a curveball and it dropped right at the same time. Pretty good picture here, isn't it? Di-a-le-go. All right, what is that word?
It's a contract word with a preposition added to the
Well,
stem.
it's not a contract, but a compound.
Compound, yeah.
Compound word. You got dia added to Lego, isn't that right? Isn't that right? Sure. All right. Now then he says, listen, I want to make that into a first aorist, and so in order to make it into a first aorist, I have to do this to it, and so I got lots of things I got to change, because the augment never goes before the preposition. The augment always goes on the stem. But I can't get along with two vowels. And so they are we happy? Because the sigma works on the gamma to make xc, just like it did as far as the future is concerned. Yes, sir.
How come you didn't change to eta?
Huh?
How come
Well-
the alpha and epsilon didn't change to eta?
Anyone suggest why? All right.
Because he gave you a little rule right here on the contracts. It says if it's an exception, if there's an epsilon, another iota, or a p in front, you don't change it. No?
And
That's a good one.
then there's something else. Didn't we learn something about Crassus? How there are some particular words and so forth that smash together and some don't smash together? We did a long time ago. But the reason it isn't changed also is because that is not a part of the word. See, that's a preposition. And so it just deletes the alpha. See? That is not part of the word. Okay. Now then, tau delta theta acts exactly the same way as your future. All right, now I think I better do a little bit of reading here, because this first aorist is very interesting and exceptionally important. There is no difference in meaning between a first aorist and a second aorist. Both express punctiliar action. One action. Now then review paragraph 178 and 179. There were originally two verb types, the one denoting durative or linear action, the other momentary or punctiliar action. Thus in estheo, the verb stem is durative or linear, and in ephagon, the verb stem is punctiliar. I'm eating, or I ate. See? So in English, I blink the eye is different kind of action than live a life. One is a momentary action, the other is durative action. Okay. Now then, in Greek, this matter of the kind of action in the verb stem or the root is called what? You Germans here today?
Artionsart.
Artinsart.
Octiensart.
Artionsart.
Artiensart. Applies to all verbs. So there is an octiensart to all verbs. Refers to the kind of action in the verb stem. Okay. This kind of action of the verb stem itself was before there was any idea of the latter tense developed. So he said, when it comes to the matter of octiensart, that was before, that came into being a whole lot earlier than the idea of anything involving the tense. All right, now the aorist tense at first was used with verb stems of punctiliar sense. In other words, when tense did come in, well, the aorist just applied itself to those verbs that looked at not durative action, but looked at continuous action. I'm sorry, let me back up. The aorist tense, when it did come in, it was applied only to verbs that looked at point action, like blink, not live. See? And that was when it came first. The verb stem itself may accent the beginning of the action, the end of the action, or the whole, or the action as a whole. The aorist tense itself always means point action, punctiliar action. But the individual stem meaning may deflect the punctiliar action to the beginning or to the end. Consequently, in the aorist, the tense idea is to be combined with the verb stem meaning. Now let me just say this. When it comes to the matter of tense, even though in the originally it related only two verbs that denoted punctiliar action, that went off the scene. Aorist tense can apply to all verbs now. Okay? But he's just simply now pointing out to us how that with reference to the tense concerning verb stem meanings, thus in punctiliar action, three distinctions arise. Number one, the unmodified point action called constative. Number two, the point action with a stress on the beginning of the action called ingressy. The point action with a stress on the conclusion or end of the action called effective. Now I want you to change that word effective. I want you to make it culminative. Culminative. So you have, we'll illustrate here, what he has just said by way of the stress concerning an aorist tense. Now it's illustrated as a point, isn't it? So we're going to enlarge that point. We're going to make that point a circle, realizing that that circle indicates point or punctiliar action. Now the stress of that verb can be on the beginning of that action, can look at the action as a whole, or can look at the end of that action. Now this is called ingressive, that's called constative, and that's called culminative. Alright? Now that's not too difficult. If I were you, I would just put that in my mind. You can put it down in your book or whatever you want to. But that is what he is meaning by virtue of ingressive, constative, and culminative. That looks at the beginning of the act, that looks at the culmination of the act, and that looks at the act as a whole, even though in the aorist it's just looking at a point action. So he's going to illustrate for us that which you have by virtue of the discussion. Thus, it says here, of his fullness we received. We received. All right? Now then, la bama. We received it. Well, that looks at the culminative, doesn't it? Of his fullness, that act has been completed. We received. Isn't that right? We received the action. We received what? Of his fullness. Now then, the next illustration, the word became flesh. All right? That is ingressy, isn't it? Looking at action that the flesh became. It became flesh. The Word did. That's in John 1:14. Now then, in the next illustration, he dwelt among us. He dwelt among us. Or he tabernacled among us. That's looking at a verb in the aorist tense that denotes an action in its entirety. See? Oh. Now do you see how this ingressive, constative, and culminative works? In this case, he has used three different verbs. And those three different verbs are looked at by virtue of an action which can be characterized by ingressive, constative, culminative. We received. That's culminative. He became. That looks at something in the beginning, doesn't it? On he dwelt. Well, he continued, didn't he? he stayed. All right? Now then, he tries to illustrate this in the next paragraph there, but doesn't do nearly as good a job as he does with the three illustrations that he's just given us concerning this ingressive, constitutive, and culminative. Now then, I want to read these few paragraphs and call your attention to some of the important things. The aorist tense, although at first it was confined to verbs of punctiliar action, came gradually to be made on verbs of durative action. So also verbs of durative action came to have the tenses of punctiliar action. Thus the tenses came to be used for the expression of the idea that once belonged only to the verb stem. That is, the aorist tense imposed a punctiliar idea on a durative verb. So also the present tense imposed a durative idea on a punctiliar verb stem. Thus the aorist just treats as punctiliar an act which is not in itself point action. This is the advance that the tense makes on the verb stem or root. So all aorists are punctiliar in fact of statement. Now he just simply stated in that big long paragraph the fact that the tense now is used with all the verbs. Okay? And it's the tense, the punctiliar tense, that imposed itself upon all different verbs. And those verbs just simply help us decide what's ingressive, constant, and culminative. Now you ought to be thankful for small favors because he's going to give you about 3 or 4 more aorists next year. So get a hold of the ingressive, constant, culminative aorists now. All right, now then, 307. Of course, the kind of action of the tense and the kind of action of the verb run through the whole tense, mode, infinitive, and participle. Okay? Not only verbs, but also that which is true for modes, infinitive, and participle. What was said in lessons 24 and 25 about the meaning of the second aorist applies also to the first aorist. And what is said in this lesson applies to the second aorist. Now then it says review, 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 review the meaning of modes. Now I would underline that 3 or 4 times. Review the meaning of modes. And right off the top of your hat, what does mode mean?
Manner of affirmation or the way something is done?
Way something is said. Way something is expressed. Okay? Now then, there are your exercises. Exercise 309, do all of it, okay? That will be a good little exercise for you for tomorrow, along with other responsibilities which you have. So, you have a busy afternoon and a busy evening between your naps. Is that right? All right, that's good. Now the last class period we looked at the first aorist from the standpoint of the mode indicative. Now he introduces you to the active and middle of the first aorist in the subjunctive mode. One of the things that you must always remember, that when it comes to the subjunctive mode, your thematic vowel is the omega and the eta, and they are the primary endings, right? And the subjunctive mode never, 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 never. That's one of the specifics about Greek. In this case, subjunctive mode never takes an augment. Never takes an augment. So, that immediately helps us out. On page 126, the first aorist, subjunctive active in middle of luo. Look at it. You have the sign of the first aorist. What is the sign of the first aorist?
So?
The sigma.
Yeah.
The sigma. Remember, in the indicative it was sigma with the alpha. Now then, since you have already learned the subjunctive endings, you've already learned the first aorist. Add sigma to it. See? Luso, luces, lucei, lusomen, luceti, lusosi. You've already got it learned, haven't you? Just a little word of caution for you. Don't forget, we've got the iota subscript in the second and third person singular. All right? Now then, notice your middle. Exactly the same, fellas. Lusomai, lusei, lusetai, lusomatha, luseste, lusomtai. Okay? And I've already told you just what he stated by way of observation. The thematic vowel is the omega eta. The primary endings used with a sigma and no augment. Okay? Now then, paragraph 313. You learned your lesson yesterday with reference to the changes that take place in your contract verbs. The alpha, the eta, the alpha, the epsilon, and omega. Well, with the first aorist subjunctive, it does the same thing, but no augment. Happy? Look at agapao. What is it? It's agapeso, agapeses. See that? No augment, but your alpha, which precedes the sigma, is changed to the eta. So is the epsilon in poieto, and when you come to plerao, the omicron is changed to the omega before the sigma. Now you learned your lesson yesterday with reference to the first aorist indicative. However, the first aorist indicative always has your augment. So let's just put it up. Whoops. Play, ra, o. Play, ra. All right. Now, I want to make it the first aorist indicative active. So, play, row. So, okay? No. How's that? Is that better? Will that help us some?
Yes.
Sa, sas, say. Isn't that right?
Just need breathing.
Huh?
Just need a breathing on the augment.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect. All right, now, I want to make that a first aorist active subjunctive. As far as the mode, see? We're talking about that mode. So, it is play, row, so. No augment. And you have your primary endings. Omega, eta. No difference at all. Is it? Yes, sir.
So is context is the only way you can distinguish the first aorist subjunctive active from the future indicative active?
Yeah, I was
Usually
waiting for that.
Usually there's in it or something.
There isn't when it comes to the matter of form, is it? Also, when it comes to the matter of sozo, so is future and first aorist by form. Sozo. Okay, I want to make it future. What is it? So. That's also first aorist subjunctive, isn't it? So how in the world am I going to tell?
Context.
Attaboy, context. Context. The context is going to tell you whether you're talking about punctiliar action or whether you're talking about future action. Okay? The sense of the sentence. All right? Fine. Okay? Now then. On top of page 127, he tells you the same thing about your mutes. The only difference is there is no augment, no augment, no augment, no augment. Okay? Precisely the same. Now you see how simple one lesson follows another when you're dealing with a verb? He's just simply introduced you to only 3 things in this lesson. Now, 3 important things. And that's this. When it comes to the subjunctive, and we're talking about first aorist, he said as far as the play, roll, saw, that is indicative, as we've just stated. The only thing I'm telling you is I'm telling you about that, and I'm telling you about that. And remember, it's that. See? The first aorist has your segment. The first aorist has the primary endings, and the first aorist has no augment. Those 3 things. Can you remember that? Very simple. So if you've learned your previous lesson, you got this already in a bag, haven't you? Very simple. All right. Now, let's just have a little fun here. Oh, we'll give you a little exercise this morning, boys. Now then, I'm going to write some things on the board here. I-T-O. Oops. I-T-O. And deck. Oh my. And so. Now then.
I'll do the sozo.
Well, let me change that. That's too easy. That's too easy. Let's see. Let me put it this way. Fan e. Whoop. Isn't that right? Fan e ramo. Okay. Wes, I want you to come to the board. I want you to come to the board in light of the discussion which we have just had. And I want you to write for me the first person singular, first aorist active subjunctive of that. first aorist active subjunctive of that.
Okay.
Anything wrong with that?
Different color, that's all.
The chalk's different color, that's all. But it's right. Attaboy. You see, you have no augment. You've changed your contract epsilon to the eta. You have the sign of the first aorist, which is sigma. And you have the primary subjunctive ending. All right, fine and dandy. All right, Dwayne. I want you to come to the board, and I want you to give me...
That's the hard one.
He's a looking. He's a looking. I want you to give me the first aorist active subjunctive. Active subjunctive.
The active
Subjunctive of first aorist active subjunctive of decoline.
Okay, I'm not sure if you're pulling a loop on me, but would I say deco? Is it somai, first person? It's got to be written in the middle, doesn't it? Because it's a deponent.
Well, we're just gonna let them lower the boom on you.
Okay.
What's wrong with that?
Or maybe this shouldn't be there at all. Cut this off. I'll just go with. Let me Sigma key.
Yeah, that's right.
I can't remember the. Is it this one? Okay, I'll take my chances. I'll get corrected.
Keep going.
Omai, is it?
Huh?
Omai, Soma.
Now then,
Somewhat.
where's your accent?
Oh,
All right.
good one. Good one.
Now, did you see it? All right. Your sigma combines with your key to make exceed, doesn't it? And then it's a deponent verb, so it's dexomai.
Never would have got that.
Attaboy. Attaboy, Dwayne.
Close.
Great. Close. All right. Come on up, young man. Come on up, Luke.
I'll bring my book with me.
No, you don't want your book. Now I want you to write for me the first aorist active subjunctive of Fanny Rockwell. All right? How's that? Is that all right?
Watch it, boy.
Could be confusing.
No, that's all right.
Yeah.
It's Fanny Rosa. Fanny Rosa. Okay. Because it's a contract verb. We'll make a contract. All right. Well, I want you to write out number 314. We've just played around with it just a little bit. And anyway, do it, will you? Along with your exercises. Now, let me just read 315 through 317. Now, the kind of action, as far as the first aorist active subjunctive is concerned, kind of action is what?
13, sir?
No.
No, the word
Punctiliar.
Punctiliar. Punctiliar. All right. Now then, in 316, it needs to be repeated that the difference in meaning between the present subjunctive and the aorist subjunctive is in kind of action expressed in the two tenses. Durative action in the present and punctiliar action in the aorist. So when you've got the present tense subjunctive, durative. When you got the aorist subjunctive, punctiliar. No problem there, is it? No, not so. But paragraph 317 is a little something that you need to remember. The aorist subjunctive in the second and third persons with may is used to express a prohibition. Now it doesn't mean every time you see may with the second and third person, it doesn't mean that's a prohibition. But when you do have a prohibition, it will be in the aorist subjunctive with may in the second and third persons. Now he gives you the illustration. Now it's generally in the second person. Me arxiste legeme. Arxiste legeme. Alright? Now then, you see arxiste, could you parse that for me?
The second.
Hey, go ahead.
Go ahead, Luke.
That's the present middle subjunctive. No, that's the first aorist subjunctive middle of the second person plural.
Yeah, that's second. Okay.
Fixed it all up.
Once it's on paper, I just unscramble it. And
Second aorist, second
Now
person.
let's just put that back in that bucket and shake it up again, shall we? So, I'll put it on the board here. Now what it is? No. Arx es fe. Now then, give me the person first.
It's second person,
Second person,
plural.
second person plural. Now tense.
It's first aorist,
First, aorist,
subjunctive
subjunctive,
middle
middle, of,
arche,
no,
archon, archon,
are, co, mine. Alright? Now in your parsing, I always want you to give me the person first, and then the tense, okay? Now, it says here, do not begin to say, or you do not begin to say. See? Do not begin to speak. Do not begin to say. All right, now then, in the third person singular, he says it's less often that you'll find these things in the third person singular. When you do, let no one cause you to err. Parse for me, Wes. Plan AC.
Plan AC is second person singular, first aorist subjunctive middle, I know.
Now stick it back in that bucket and shake it up again.
I wasn't right.
No, it wasn't right.
Oh, it's okay. Third person singular.
Let's put it on here.
Oh, it can be either one.
Well, how does it sound in the sentence? Sound in the middle?
It sounds like a
O, ace, A.
yeah, but I mean, it's whether it's an third person octave or a second person middle.
Huh?
Third person singular octave is the same as the second person singular middle.
Right.
And I guess it depends on.
Well, he's already given you. He's already told you what he wants.
Third person.
Third person.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Third person plural.
Third
Third
person
person.
singular plural. Okay. I mean, singular?
Third person plural.
No, singular?
Yeah, that's right. Sorry. Third person singular.
Okay, so then it's first aorist, subjunctive, active.
First aorist subjunctive active of
Is it, plano?
no.
Plan. I can't.
No.
Oh, that's taken out.
Now that's sigma. That is really your ending, isn't it?
Right?
Okay. Now what takes place
Then
before
yeah.
the sigma?
It is either an epsilon or a iota, or
It's either an epsilon or a
iota,
no
alpha.
alpha. Now do you remember your vocabulary?
No.
You don't remember your vocabulary? Well, it's upon. Uh-oh.
That, did we?
Probably did.
Now, Dr. Clark, can I just throw one thing in here? When looking at this sentence, the first one, he says here, let no one. Okay, that's taken from me, tis humes. Cause you to err. He's taken you from the verb, which is second person, singular.
No.
Or else it'd have to be plural.
No, he's not taking you from the verb. What's the subject?
You.
No.
No one.
All right. Tis is your subject.
Okay.
No one is what? Third person singular. Let no one. Let no one cause you to stray, or let no one lead you astray. Let no one, see? What case is humas?
It's accusative.
All right. Therefore, it has to be what?
Singular.
What is it? What's its function?
Oh, it's the direct object.
The object of the verb. Let no one lead you astray. That's a little
Okay,
bit.
I see. So the second you is the humes.
Yeah.
Or humas, I should say. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Good enough. Now then.
Dr. Locke?
Yes,
One
sir.
Question. For the subjunctive, where's the part how the subjunctive was something that's not definite? So why is it might or something not like that put into sentences?
Because he's just got through telling you that in prohibitions,
Okay, not even for this, but for the rest of them, they would be translated with might.
might or may or
Or
should.
might have said.
Yeah. He's giving you an illustration of prohibition. So don't take the illustration of the prohibition and apply that rule to all subjunctives.
Okay.
See, he's just showing you how to make prohibitions.
So the rest though would be.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right, be sure and do all of your exercises. Now then, let's go back. We've got a few moments. Just a few moments, and let's exercise you, okay? For just a little bit. Well, let's just do the first one. That should exercise a little bit of our thinking. Page 125 now. Eis tuto gar Christos apethonen kai ezeisen. Okay, can you do that, Wes?
Try.
Huh?
I can try.
All right.
Oh, you just want the straight translation?
Yeah, I just want you to translate that now for me.
What I got, I didn't mix it on yet, as I just put, for into this Christ died and lived. I couldn't figure that one out.
Okay. Eis tuta
into this. That's what I put it.
All right, now that's an idiom
It's an idiom.
for this cause.
Oh, for this cause.
Yeah.
We took that.
Well, I don't know whether we took that or not.
I don't think so, because I have it written in my book.
Okay.
Okay? All of you then learned something at this point. Ace tuta. Gar. Number 1 on page 125. Ace tuta. Unto this is the same thing as for this cause. Christ. Case of Christos.
Nominative.
Nominative. Function.
Subject.
Subject of what?
Sentence.
Thank you, Wes. Subject of what, though, as far as
Of the verbs.
of the verbs? Parse for me, young man. Apethonen.
Apathonin. It's second aorist.
Let me give me your persons first.
Oh, my persons.
Give me always the person first.
Sweating. I don't know.
Sure you do. You've already got your subject expressed. And when you have your subject expressed, you know exactly what person.
Oh, that's right. It's movable new. I was getting confused about that.
Yeah.
Okay, it's third person singular.
Third person singular, okay?
Second aorist and indicative active participle. No, indicative active. Second aorist indicative active.
Of what?
Apathanasco.
Apothanasco.
Apathanasco.
It's not a participle, is it?
No.
Third person singular, second aorist, indicative active of apothanasco, I die. See? All right, now Christ died. Aorist, punctiliar action, died. And, now parse for me, azasin.
Azasin is third person singular, second aorist indicative active. Oh wait. Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, that's right. Of Zeo.
Now who'd like to shoot at him?
Not me.
First aorist.
First aorist.
I live.
Look at the sigma.
There's a augment.
Yeah, but first aorist indicative.
That's augments.
Remember?
Oh, so what's?
The subjunctives don't carry augments. That's all.
Oh.
Now you see, this is first aorist. Apethonen. You're getting confused now.
Yeah.
Let's go at it here. Now then, and second aorist, first aorist. Why?
No, I was just gonna ask you. Oh, the sigma.
See that? Both have augments, don't they? But this one doesn't have the sigma. This one has a sigma. So that's the difference between second aorist and first aorist. Good exercise to keep you on your toes. He died. He lived. No difference in punctiliar function, is it? He died, he lived. But a lot of difference with reference to what kind of an aorist. And that little baby right there tells you it's a first aorist. Nothing else will. Well, yes, it will.
Yeah.
That will. Because that's from Zopple. Remember that? I live. I live. All right. All's fair and square in love and war, isn't it? Well, that's all right. But now, you do see it now.
Mhm.
Do you see it, Luke?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good enough then. All right, I believe we'll call that quits for this class session. And just keep on your toes with reference to the exercises that he has given you. And we'll try and take a few more tomorrow. All right. Now he follows with the first aorist tense. First you had your indicative, secondly you had your subjunctive, and now he's going to give to you the first aorist active and middle participles. He's well organized, isn't he, as far as this book is concerned. And if you will follow along in his presentation, a person can do a good job of building, but you have to build with him. You can't decide to take a holiday for a week or so from him and then try to find out what he's doing at the end of that week with a new lesson. He's also going to discuss for you some adjectives and adjectives of the third declension. Now you're familiar with the third declension by now. Third declension has given you somewhat of a difficulty as far as third declension nouns are concerned. They seem to be very, very irregular. But we've had all three declensions now. We've had the first declension, we've had the second declension, we've had the third declension. So we are just going to build on what we have been introduced to. So now, first of all, let's observe what he tells us by way of significance of the first aorist participle. Paragraph 320. The first aorist active participle of luo is lusas. In the masculine, as far as the feminine is concerned, lusasa. As far as the neuter is concerned, lusan. Now, notice the scheme, page 129. Masculine, feminine, and neuter. In the masculine, it's lusas, lusantas, lusanti, lusanta, lusantes, lusanton, lusasi, lusantas. Feminine, lusasa, lusases, lusase, lusasan, lusasai, lusason, lusasais, lusasas. Neuter, lusan, lusantas, lusanti, lusan. Lusanta, lusanton, lusasi, lusanta. In the masculine and neuter, what scheme by way of declension does he follow?
The third declension.
Third declension. Third declension. You deal with the feminine, what scheme does he follow there?
The first.
First declension. First declension. All right. Now basically, that's what he's going to tell you. of course, along with how certain things are formed when you come to the observation. All participles with a masculine nominative in alpha sigma are declined like lusos, lusosa, and lusan. Now, again, let me point out what is the key that this happens to be a first aorist participle. What's the key?
The sigma
The sigma
and minus augment.
and
No augment.
no augment and what's the ending?
Os.
Alpha. Alpha, see? Your first declension in your in your indicative, sigma alpha, right? With the augment. The first declension, subjunctive, was sign of the sigma with your subjunctive endings, right? The omega, the eta thematic verb. Now the sign of the first declension participle is once again your sigma alpha. No augment. No augment. Up to this time, you have discovered that there are absolutely no augments with reference to participles. Present participle, second aorist participle, first aorist participle. No augments. Okay? Let's see what else. I guess there isn't much more, except now paragraph 322. Paragraph 322. The first aorist middle participle of luo. Now observe. Lusamenos in the masculine neuter. Lusamene in the nominative feminine singular. Lusamenon in the neuter singular. Neuter nominative singular. Now then, again, as far as the masculine is concerned and as far as the neuter is concerned, you would decline those second declension. Lusamenos, lusamenu, okay? When it comes to the first, when it comes to the feminine, it'll be first declension. Lusamene, lusamenes, lusamene. Okay? Neuter, lusamenon, lusamenu, lusameno, lusamena. Okay? All right. He's more or less just stated that. The first aorist middle participle, like the present and second aorist middle participle, is declined like an adjective of the first and second declensions. You ought to underline that and go back and review. Review the adjectives of the first and second declension. Would you do that? And that will help you. Now then, what's the kind of action when it comes to a first aorist participle? The kind of action is punctiliar. Exactly the same kind of action as the second aorist participle. Precisely. Now he gives you the declension of the adjective pos. Now in this particular adjective, notice the masculine and neuter. What declension? Pos, pantos, panti, pantos, pantes, panton, posse, pantos.
The third declension.
Third declension. What about the neuter?
Same thing.
Third declension. What about the feminine?
It's first.
First declension. First declension. Now then, the big problem at this point, of course, is your accents. Now he's going to tell you, as far as pos is concerned and as far as hopos is concerned, one is just the strengthened form of the other. Hopos is a strengthened form of pos, and except for the accent, is declined like pos. See? All right? Now I'll wait for just a minute. Paragraph 325 is simply the notation and observation with reference to the declension of pos, which you can read yourself. Now, paragraph 326. Examine carefully the following examples of the use of pos. How is pos used? How is it? All right, now then, remember that it is an adjective. It is an adjective. Therefore, it is going to function like an adjective. It does have a few peculiarities in order for one to get the proper translation. In the predicate position. In the predicate position. Now, what is the predicate position, Wes?
It's, there's no article.
No article with it. No article with it. So you've got passa, hey, polis. All the city. All the city. See that? Or all cities, or all the cities. Okay? Now, sometimes you can make an accurate distinction. In the singular, sometimes you can translate it every. In the plural, all. See the difference? Every one being singular. All, that's more than one, isn't it? Now, that rule doesn't always hold, but if I were you, I would file that, because in our translation, try both every and all to see which one works out in the context of your examples. Now then, in the attributive position, what's the attributive position, Dwayne?
It follows the article.
Follows the article. Okay? Here. Hey, passa polis. The city as a whole. Or it could be the whole city. The whole city. Same as ha pas namas. The entire law. The whole law. Now immediately you're going to come along and say, wait a minute. Pas means every or all. They've got entire here. Well, it means the same, doesn't it? When you talk about the whole law, talk about the entire law. I don't know whether this is too early to introduce you to it or not, because I don't want you to get sloppy by virtue of your definitions. But do you know how definition came into being? By usage. By usage. Let me give you an illustration. I've got a little grandson. You know it, little Daniel. Well, he was over visiting Grandpa and Grandma. And we had some grapes on the table. And he asked for some grapes. But do you know how he asked for them? Grandma, I want some drupes. Drupes. Well, that gave us a new definition for grapes, didn't it? Was he too far wrong? Well, grapes hang down, isn't that right? and you lift them up by the stem, they're drooping down. Well, now Lyle and I, we associate the droops with Daniel. Well, that definition for that little guy came about, as you see, by the way they looked. Droops. Well now, it's always been grapes to me. Why? Because that's how I learned that thing. That's how I learned to call that little chunk of fruit. Now, over on the islands during the war, there were these big tropical plants. Now there were certain things on these tropical plants. Now when I saw that plant with that little green thing up there, what did I do? What's that? See, I didn't know. Oh, that's a papaya. All right, that's a papaya. But why didn't I call it the papaya beforehand? It hadn't been named that to me beforehand, had it? It hadn't been named that. Now, this little word entire, you haven't learned that as a definition for pos, have you? But is it proper to translate it that way? The all law, we would want to say it. But is there any difference? The entire law means the same thing, doesn't it? Exactly. The entire law. And when he's saying the entire law, talking about all the law or the whole law. So, don't get sloppy with your definition just yet. And I won't let you get sloppy with your definition later on either, because you're going to have to justify it. But that comes about by syntax. Now then here, the use of pos, where hanamos is in the attributive position, which means the entire law or the whole law. Now then, hoi pantes andres. Now, how would you say that? As you know, men, the what? The all men? Or how would you translate it? How would you just translate it? Hoi pantes andres.
Oh, the total number of the men?
That's what he says, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or you could say it this way. All the men. All the men. Now then, he is putting in here total number of the men. Well, certainly andres isn't genitive, is it? And we've used of the book or of the law and so forth like that when it's genitive. But in order to express the total number of men, the total number of men, you have to use it that way, don't you? To express that Greek structure. The total number of men. Or I'd just simply translate it, all of the men. All of the men. And there I've got an adjective which is going to tell me, that is in the case, what the men has to be in the attributive position, because it has to agree with the noun it modifies in gender, number, and case, doesn't it? That's what we've got. So there is an illustration of the usage of pos in both the predicate and the attributive position. Now number 3. With a singular noun without the article, passa polis or polis passa can mean every city. Well, why can it mean that? You have learned in previous lessons that context is going to tell you how to translate the adjective, whether it is attributive or whether it is predicate. Now you're going to want to say in the first example, as well as in the second example, since there isn't any article, you're going to want to call that predicate, aren't you? But it's translated attributive. See? Now, he's done that for you for the purpose of showing to you that in a context, the context is going to determine for you, if you don't have the article, where and what and how it should be translated. Okay.
A question, just to go back to the predicate position.
Mm-hmm.
How come that's, like, I know it wouldn't make sense, cities of all, but how come it's then they put in like in an attributive position, all cities?
And they translated it like the attributive, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But it is in the predicate position. He's showing you how you have to translate it, even though it's in a predicate position. Just the same thing that we had to do by adding of the men. See? All right, now then, he's going to give you a little bit of exercise with reference to pos and the participle. Is a common construction in the New Testament. Passa and the participle. So here it is. Passa acum. Everyone hearing, or everyone who hears. Or, now then, you couldn't translate it all because the participle is a singular, isn't it? And you know it's singular because it's got the singular masculine article in the nominative. Okay. So you know you have to translate pos as every. Everyone hearing or everyone who hears. Now let's look at the next one here. Pantes hoi akuantes. All those hearing or all those who hear. And you're going to say, where in the world did he get the those? All the ones hearing. That's what we'd like to do it. Well, that's perfectly all right. All the ones hearing, or all the ones who hear. Exactly the same as all those hearing. All those hearing. Now then, he is showing you a different case. Panti to akuanti. Well, how are you going to translate that? Well, you have to translate it by case. To everyone hearing, or to everyone who hears. You see, the to comes from what? The case. Panti. All right, now then, you've got a nominative in the plural here, but you have an aorist tense. See, with aku santes. All right, now how you translate that? All those having heard, or all those who heard. Or you might translate it, all who heard. All who heard. Now then, do you get the punctiliar force of accusantes? Heard, heard, heard. Not hearing, as you would in the present. All right, now then, let's turn the page. Paragraph 327. Hoste, so that to be distinguished from hoste used as an inferential conjunction, which means and so or therefore. What do you mean by inferential?
Something that's inferred.
No. It's sort of a concluding. Concluding.
Summarization.
And so or therefore. See? You made some statements. Now then, therefore, on the basis of what's gone ahead. That's what we'll call inferential. Now then, it's translated so that, and it is used with the infinitive, twice with the indicative, to express result. And he simply gives you an example of what he means there. And he healed them so that the blind man was seen. He healed him. Now then, you see you've got an aorist for therapeuo. He is in the verb. Auton is the accusative, the object of the verb. Now you've got hoste. And he is saying that hoste is going to introduce a result. So that. That's the reason hoste is translated so that. Okay? So that the blind, which modifies auton, so that the blind man was seen. However, ton tuflon is acting as something. Ton tuflon is acting as the subject of the infinitive. Well, got news for you. You can't have a subject of an infinitive. But it's acting as a subject of the infinitive. Therefore, he's going to give us a discussion about tuflon. The accusative ton tuflon is not the subject of the infinitive blepein, although it's acting as the subject. It's not the subject. Contradiction of terms? All right, now then, he explains. The infinitive does not have a subject. It has no personal endings and is not a finite verb. Now then, the accusative limits an idea in content, scope, and duration. The action in blepein is limited by the accusative to the tuflon. This use of the accusative is generally called the accusative of general reference. Hang on to it. Hang on to it. There is a word that looks like a subject plus the infinitive. Subject plus the infinitive. Now then, this infinitive cannot take a subject because it is not a finite verb. It doesn't have any endings to it. No endings in here. Therefore, this word that acts as a subject has to be in the accusative case. And it is called the accusative of general reference. Okay? Now that isn't any more to it than just that. Just simple. Infinitive, not a verb. It's a verbal noun. But there are words that act like a subject of a word that can't take a subject. It has to be an accusative case. Okay, got it straight? All right. All right, that's your lesson for today. That'll take a little bit of thinking, a little bit of doing. But it's not hard. It really isn't difficult. And if you just go right along with what he has to say, you've learned so much already. You've got your background of your first aorist participle. You just have to notice some of the different ways of pos, how it is used with participle, and then the fact that an infinitive cannot take a subject, but can take the accusative of general reference. So do your exercises for 328 with your other lesson for the vocabulary for tomorrow. Okay? All right, today we're ready for lesson number 39. The adjectives of the third declension with stems in S and the irregular adjectives palus and magos. Now, when it comes to these two particular adjectives, palus and magos, you really need to have them down pretty good, because they occur so many times in our Greek New Testament and in so many different forms that you really want to be most familiar with them. Now then, again, the third declension. The third declension just has so many variations to it, and he's going to give you the adjectives now of the third declension, and he uses aletheis to do it. But he shows you that originally this particular stem, or not necessarily originally, but the stem of aletheis ends in epsilon sigma. So consequently, he is going to give you the declension of such an adjective, which is in the third declension in the scheme which follows. Now, as you look at this, please observe that when it comes to the masculine and the feminine of aletheis, true, that you only have two particular schemes. You have the masculine and the feminine being the same. And then you have the neuter. And as you look at them, you'll discover that the neuter runs pretty well to form, as the neuter usually does when it comes to the matter of the nominative and the accusative. Now that's true both for the singular and for the plural. Now then, when it comes to the masculine and feminine, you'll find, in this case, the nominative and the accusative the same in the plural, but not in the singular. Now, memorize that if you can. But as we turn the page, he says, you need to know this business of aletheis, because there are quite a few adjectives. There are 60 adjectives in the New Testament that are declined very much like this. Now then, go back and review the matter of genos and compare these two. All right, in paragraph 331, he will give you the developments of these various cases and why they develop that way. It's not too difficult to follow through. The only thing is just remember, particularly if you want to see the development, that's fine, but I don't want you to get bogged down. Don't get bogged down with the developments. He'll show you how they come into being, but I just wouldn't clutter up your memory with so much development. You memorize what the declension is like, and if you want to know why, this is the place to go to find out why, and that's the reason it's given to you. Now, some find that memory comes quite easy. Others find that it comes difficult, but it's helpful to have reason. And so he gives in the observation reason. So I commit it to you from this point of view. And then in number 4 and 5, he points out some of the things which I have just mentioned. Now when it comes to the matter of the declension of palus, all right, you have here different declension. You have in the masculine and neuter the second declension. And when it comes to the feminine, you have the first declension. So you've got a third declension, and then you've got a second and first declension. So you are constantly being forced, aren't you, into the review of declensions. And by this time, you've probably got the second and first declension down pretty well packed, when he's been throwing it at you all the time in various aspects of the third declension. Now then, the declension of megos. Well, in this declension, you've got masculine, you've got feminine, and you've got neuter. And again, what have you got? You've got the same thing. You've got the second and the first declension. Page 136. And he simply points out to you in observation what we have mentioned already. The rather important syntactical consideration of this lesson is found in the following. When it comes to the matter of indirect discourse. Now then, before we even get started with this, I want to find out if you know what indirect discourse is. What do we understand by indirect discourse? What is indirect discourse?
It's, would it be a third party? Like, you're saying something that another person said?
Well, not necessarily. Well, it can be a third party, but it primarily a second party, isn't it? Second party expressing that which the first party is expressed. Isn't that right? It's snowing good. And we've got a lot of snow on the ground. And it looks like the snow is building up more and more. That's my statement, isn't it? That's direct statement. Now then, suppose, Wes, you've said the same thing. Now I come along and say this. Well, Wes said, the snow's getting deep. Now then, I'm making a statement of the first party, isn't that right? So, Wes said, or he says, the snow's getting deep. Now then, let's take a look and see what we've got by way of this indirect discourse. He's going to give you 3 examples. 3 examples of indirect discourse. That is, indirect assertion. Well, what do we mean by assertion? That's statement, isn't it? Number 2, indirect question. Number 3, indirect commands. So there are 3 different types of indirect discourse. that he wants to introduce you to, because in our Greek New Testament we have this used quite a lot. All right, now, indirect assertion. It says there are three ways to do it. One of the most prevalent ways is a statement followed after hati. Thou sayest that I am king. Now, we would come along and say, well, you say you're king. All right? But notice how I said this. If I'm speaking, say, to one of you, well, you say you are king. But you would say, I am king. I would in turn say, you're king. You say, you are king. Now then, I changed verbs, didn't I? Please notice in this indirect discourse here that it follows what the first party stated. You say that I am king. I am king. Now that's what he said. So the first party says, I am king. But if I were to say it to someone else and translate it like this, well, you say that you're king. You say that you're king. Now then the next one, they saw that he was eating. Another indirect discourse. Now with the infinitive, notice here, they say that he remains. Okay, here we go. The present verb is legusin. They are saying. Now then, they're saying what? He remains. Saying that he remains. Auton is what case?
Accusative.
What's it acting as? Acting as the subject of the infinitive. That's accusative of general reference. They say, he remains. Or they say, he is remaining. Now then, with the participle, we saw what? We saw certain ones casting out demons. Certain ones were casting out demons. That's the indirect. We saw what? We saw indirect action. Now then, indirect questions. For he himself knew what was in man. Now, the direct question, I know what is in man. No, or that, no. That would be assertion. It would be, what is in man? But when you turn it around and make it indirect, for he knew what was in man. They saw where he was abiding. They asked what they were eating. Now in the indirect commands, they said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. They were saying to Paul through the Spirit, do not go up to Jerusalem. Right? But in your Bible, why it would be as an indirect command here. Now, he says, listen, I want you to pay careful attention to what we've just given you by illustration. Because now he's going to make some explanations. Now let's look at it. Indirect assertions then, this is what he's trying to drive across, indirect assertions or declarations are expressed by hati and the indicative, by the infinitive, and by the participle. There are three ways of expressing indirect statements. Number 2. The same introductory words are generally used in indirect questions as those which are found in direct questions. That is, how it's expressed in the direct will often be found in construction in the indirect. And that's what I pointed out to you in Basileus MA. The infinitive is frequently used in indirect commands, such as we've had in number 3. Now A. Sometimes henna and a finite mode is used. Okay, just file that away. But now number 4. The tense generally remains unchanged in the Greek indirect discourse. And so he states by illustration, sometimes there's a change, as in the first example under 2. The imperfect ain seems to represent a present in the direct, as we tried to point out to you. What is in man? That would be third person singular vein, isn't it? Now it's changed to ain. So, he says, the tense generally remains unchanged in the Greek indirect discourse, as he points out in A. Okay, number 5. The mode generally remains unchanged in the Greek indirect discourse. The subjunctive mode, phagosi, in the third example under 2, was in the direct. Now the person of the verb is or is not changed according to circumstances. In the third example under 2, the third person was first or second in the direct discourse. All right, fellas, that is really the only lesson that you're going to have on indirect discourse. It would be well to try to get that down. You're going to have to do some study on that. There isn't any way a person can convey that to your mind apart from studying it. So do your exercises on page 130, paragraph 336. Now I want to come back to our exercises that we gave you to do. And I want to put these on the board and get you to do them. Okay? Because there are one or two here that might be helpful just by way of practice, that we do it in class. Tauta panta Alesen less. Whoops here. I've got that spelled wrong. Alalesen. Jesus. And para parables. Twice oculus. All right. Which one of you fellows want to try that this morning? Which one? Are either one of you prepared?
Yeah, I can do it.
You can do it? All
Well,
right.
I can try.
All right, let's have your trial. All right, here we go.
Can I just give the translation?
Now, I want you to explain every single jot and tittle up there to me.
Okay, well first I have to look for a subject, so I find my subject because it's got the article and it's in the nominative masculine.
Okay?
It's a nominative case, so it's the Lord,
No. Actually, Jesus.
or, oh yeah, Jesus.
So you wouldn't really use,
I wouldn't put that in there.
you wouldn't put the in there. Okay? All right, now then.
Okay, and then after that I gotta find the verb. So I went up and the verb was here, and it's the third person singular, first aorist, and first aorist active of leleo, I speak, so it would be he had spoke, if
No.
you make it aorist, or he having spoken.
No. No. He spoke.
Yeah, he spoke.
Making it past, not had, but he, Jesus
spoke.
Jesus spoke. Okay, now you have the third person singular, which is in accord with our rule of concord, isn't it? As far as the express subject. Jesus spoke, okay?
Okay. And then I went up to the adjective. I don't know how to put these, but all these. This is an adjective, and this modifies the adjective.
No, it's not.
I didn't know how to put those.
Well, what kind of a word is tauta? What part of speech?
It's a demonstrative pronoun.
Demonstrative pronoun in what case? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. No, let me back up. In what gender? Masculine, feminine, neuter?
Neuter.
Neuter. All right. Now then, what number?
It's plural
Plural?
nominative or plural accusative.
Plural, accusative. All right, now then, if it is accusative, well,
It'd be all these things.
all right, he spoke all these things. Because the tauta, being neuter, plural, you have to add then the noun, don't you?
Yeah.
All these things, okay?
Let me just put that.
Okay, I'll let you get away with that for a little bit.
Well,
and then we'll,
I didn't have it like that neither.
okay.
Um,
All these things, okay?
Okay, and then follow on, there's got a prepositional phrase next, which is the locative,
Showing what?
showing location, or in this case it would be locative of spirit.
Well, that's all right. Well, it's the manner. It's what he was speaking, how he was speaking,
Yeah.
and so let's just say this locative of sphere,
Okay.
because it's in the sphere of what? What's the
Of
meaning of that
conversation.
word?
And parables.
In parables. Okay, put that down. All right, now then, what have you got here?
This was the dative to the crowds.
Okay, why do you make it dative?
Well, because it's the indirect object, he's speaking all this to them.
All right, it's the indirect object. To the crowd. Now then, in translating that in the way it should be, say it the way that it should be translated.
Jesus spoke all these things in parables to the crowds.
All right.
So
Now
actually
then-
take this off.
Yeah, that's right, because you're making that a double subject, didn't you? Jesus spoke all these things in parable to the crowds. Now, I don't mind you working it out just exactly the way you did. But now then, when you put it down on your paper, I want you to translate it in the proper Greek, in the proper English grammar that you derive from the Greek, okay? So, Jesus spoke all these things in parables to the crowds.
All right.
Yes.
One question. You made us. You said that tauta being a plural in that.
Yeah.
It demanded something, required something.
Because it is a neuter. These. See, it's a pronoun. These. Well, you have to add what it refers to. These things, and it's a neuter.
Oh, okay. You mean just adding the things, or if it was masculine, it'd be these ones or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it were masculine, it would be these men or these words or such a matter as all
Okay.
these words.
I thought you were saying something about because it was a plural, whatever. It had to put all. It had to
No,
demanded all or
Here's
something. I
the
couldn't understand that.
all these.
Yeah. Okay.
Now,
It demanded the things in there.
Yeah, that's right. Masculine, you have a masculine noun. Neuter, neuter noun. Feminine, feminine noun, which you have to add to it.
If
Okay.
it was, say it was feminine,
Hmm?
so it'd be these.
Well, you'd have to probably. He couldn't be speaking all these women.
Just wouldn't
it
be.
would have to be a noun that would be feminine gender that would go along with sense of your sentence, eh? Okay. All right. Now then, in number 1, ha pempsos me dekaios estin, without putting it on the board. Look at your books. Now, what is ha pempsos? What's pempsos?
It's a participle.
It is a participle. Now then, what gender is that participle?
It's masculine.
How can you tell?
The article.
Article, absolutely right. The article. Even though you're going to want to right at first blush, say that the ending of pempsos is alpha, which is often the feminine, isn't it? But after you've established the gender, now then, what case is it?
The nominative.
All right, now then, suppose I did not know the ending of my participle pempsos. How can I be dogmatic that it is nominative?
Because of the article.
Absolutely. Now that article has told me 2 very, very important things that I might have forgotten or I might be confused with reference to the participle. It has told me, first of all, it is masculine and gender. And secondly, it's told me that it is nominative. Now then, of course, it goes without saying that it's singular, isn't it? Nominative, masculine, singular. Now then, since I know that much about that participle, I take a look at it, and can I parse that participle? The first thing that I must know, I've already got the nominative, masculine, singular, haven't I? So what I've got to know here is what tense it is. What's the tense?
First aorist.
First aorist. And how do I arrive at the fact that it is first aorist?
Because you've got a, I guess, contract consonant. I don't know what you'd call that C there, but it's been contracted with the sigma and the P.
All right, now I must know then, I must know my vocabulary word, don't I? I must know that it comes from what?
Tempo.
Pempo. Pempo. All right, now then when I realize that it comes from pempo, all right, I've got a P there, but as far as my form is concerned, it's pempsos, isn't it? So, where did that C comes from? Well, it comes from your sigma joining with P in light of the lessons that we've learned how verbs that end in consonants act before sigma, right? So immediately then, I know I have a first aorist, because I also know that the sigma alpha is a sign of the first aorist, isn't it? Sure it is. Okay. Now then, if I were to translate that, how would I say it?
No, the one who sent
The one who sent
me.
me. Case of me. Accusative, isn't it? It's the direct object of the participle. And remember, a participle is a verbal noun and it can take an object. Okay, the one who sent me, or he who sent me. What is my verb of that sentence?
Amy.
Estin. Third person singular. And my third person singular is in direct accord with my express subject, which is the participle, isn't it? The one who sent me is, now then, what's dikaios? What case is dikaios?
It's a predicate nominative.
It's nominative, isn't it? Now then, why is it nominative? Because it follows Amy. And Amy takes the predicate nominative. So the proper way to translate that particular sentence is, the one who sent me is righteous. See? The one who sent me is righteous. So you have your subject, you have your verb, you have your predicate nominative, and little ma there is the object of the participle, not of the verb. See that? Are you beginning to see how that your translations with your participles work? Now let's see if we can find another. Let's go to number 4, just off the top of our hat. Okay? Now then, what is akousos? What part of speech is akousos?
It's a participle.
What kind of a participle?
It's a first aorist.
First aorist participle. Now then, you don't have any article to help you out. But can you remember the declension of the first aorist participle? What case is it?
It's a nominative.
Nominative. Akousos. Therefore, I've got an aorist participle. I know then that it must be heard, or something like that. Now then, what is tauta? What is tauta? Neuter.
Demonstrative pronoun.
Demonstrative pronoun. Can you tell me the case?
So, well, it's either nominative or accusative.
Okay. Now, what would you suspect it to be, following the participle akousos?
A locative.
Not a locative, but
Well, then the other one has got to be nominative then.
no.
Accusative.
You weren't thinking locative. You were thinking accusative.
So accusative, yeah.
Okay. Having heard these things,